Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our Strength and Unity series. We're so glad you're here. This space was created for us by us, centering Black folks navigating NMOSD and chronic illness with care, respect, and real talk. Whether you're newly diagnosed, undiagnosed but suspicious, a longtime thriver, caregiver, or ally, you belong here. Our goal today is simple: build community, share truth, and remind each other that we're not alone in this. Feel free to use the chat to connect, affirm, or ask questions. This is a safe and welcoming space. Take what you need, leave what you don't, and know that you're seen, valued, and worthy of care. Let's get started and pour into each other because there is strength in our unity. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible organization that brought us here today. We Are Ill. Um, I don't think I introduced myself. Did I? My name is Ashley Ratcliffe Lundy, and I'm the Director of Communications with We Are Ill. I also live with multiple sclerosis. So, We Are Ill is a nonprofit patient advocacy organization that supports, educates, and uplifts Black women living with autoimmune disorders like MS, NMOSD, and lupus, and aims to improve health equity for this community. Our vision is to redefine what sick looks like by making the chronic illness community more inclusive. We have a variety of initiatives aimed at increasing Black women's visibility in and access to patient care, research, education in the chronic illness community as a whole. Our initiatives focus on diversity in clinical trials, wellness education, self-advocacy, and community. Some of our offerings are our Wellness Weekend. This is our signature event now in its sixth year. It's happening this November 7th through 9th in Atlanta. We're new this year. We're welcoming NMOSD and lupus patients. It's a conference unlike any other you've been to. We laugh, we cry, we dance, we learn a lot, we fellowship. I highly encourage you to attend. If you're curious, check out our YouTube channel. You'll see recaps of the event. Bring your friends. We want everyone to grow and learn together. We also have blogs from our influencers about how to live well in spite of MS, which also translate to other chronic illness. We have a private Facebook group of about 2,000 Black women living with MS, and we have started hosting community meetups across the country as a place outside of Wellness Weekend where our community can gather, fellowship, and connect. So that's a little bit about We Are Ill. And now I'd like to introduce our illustrious moderator for this evening, Dr. Huyam Mubarak. She is a board certified neurologist and fellowship trained specialist in neuroimmunology. She serves as the assistant director of Barrow Global and an assistant professor of neurology at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Mubarak earned her Doctor of Medicine from Indiana University School of Medicine. She also serves as a member of We Are Ill's board of directors. Her unwavering dedication to improving access and equity in neurological care is evident in her advocacy for diversity in clinical trials and her focus on addressing health disparities globally. By combining community engagement, compassion, and a patient-centered approach, she strives to deliver and promote exceptional neurological care, regardless of her patient's circumstances or locations. Welcome, Dr. Huyam.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for those beautiful, kind words. I'm so honored to share this space with you all tonight. So whether you're living with NMOSD or caring for somebody who is, or simply here to learn, you're definitely going to be a part of a powerful conversation tonight. So let's take a moment to kind of be present and make this time for ourselves to learn a little bit more about NMO and what some of our brothers and sisters are going through. So tonight, we're not just acknowledging the disease, but we're honoring the strength and those lived experiences that Black individuals navigating NMOSD have. This is really important when we're talking about feeling empowered and wanting to have a safe space, like Ashley mentioned before, to share, to learn, and to really build this community. So we want to make sure that when you leave here today, you really feel seen and heard. That being said, I'm privileged to be joined by two very remarkable voices who are both going to bring some clinical experience and some lived wisdom to this conversation in this space. So first we have Marion Jones, and I'm going to go ahead and let her tell us a little bit more about herself.
Hi, everyone, to the We Are Ill family and community. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Marion Jones. I am an NMOSD patient. I was diagnosed in November of 2020. Went through a series of challenges along the way, which included me being partially paralyzed, learning to walk again, but a strong, story on the end, on the other side of that. I serve as an ambassador currently for the Sumaira Foundation. Have been in that capacity since 2023. In addition to just, my passion for patient advocacy and making sure that we are educated and informed when we go into those meetings with our healthcare providers. One of my superpowers since being diagnosed is that I am now a marathoner. I ran my first marathon in 2023 after having learned how to walk again. And since then, I have run 4 marathons and looking forward to running my fifth one in Berlin, Germany in September of this year. And, looking forward to sharing more about my story, my journey in a book that I will be releasing in 2026. And I dropped my Instagram handle for any of you that are interested in connecting. Would love to connect and learn more about you as well. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Oh my goodness. I don't think I could run a marathon if I wanted to, but maybe I need to come train with you. And next we have Nawandi Williams. So go ahead, Nawandi, and tell us more about yourself.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you guys cannot hear my fan. It is hot down here in Georgia. I am burning up, but we're gonna make it work. So, I am Nawandi Williams. I am a licensed therapist here in Georgia. Um, I am also a multiple sclerosis warrior. I was diagnosed in November of 2013. At the tender age of 23, I woke up one morning and could not see out of my left eye. A few spinal taps and MRIs later, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so now, fast forward here, about 11 years later, I am here with you all. Um, just pouring into a community that's near and dear to my heart, not only from a professional standpoint as a therapist, but as a patient as well. I also am the founder of my private practice. Called Release to Peace. It is a counseling practice where I work with primarily Black adult women who do live with any kind of chronic health condition, and also just talk about trauma and unique challenges that we uniquely face as Black people, more specifically Black women. And so I'm just really, really happy to be here. And I'm excited to hang out with y'all tonight.
Thank you, Nawandi. Yes, it is definitely pushing over 115 in Arizona right now. So I completely understand the heat. But thank you both for sharing. And before we dive deeper, just for everyone that has joined the conversation now, I just want to take a moment to really talk about why we're here. And we're here for supporting Black individuals living with NMOSD who deserve the space that's created for us and by us and with us in mind. So we want these spaces where our voices are prioritized, our experiences are honored, and our needs are not just an afterthought of a conversation, but really the primary reason why we're here. So thank you, Marion and Nawandi, for helping us get grounded in that truth together. And I'm looking forward to where this conversation goes tonight. Please feel free to engage in the chat. And yes, definitely MS patients and everyone else that's here to learn, you all are welcome as well. But tonight our goals are really simple. We want to be meaningful. We want to have connection, empowerment, and we want to build this community for you all. So now that we've kind of set the tone, it's time to hear some real life wisdom in this next conversation. And so as we kind of continue the conversation, I want you guys to go ahead and drop one word in the chat that describe what community means to you, okay? And so this next conversation is going to really feel like a more friendly, this is very informal conversation, because sometimes healing just starts with simply being heard. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with our two amazing panelists here. And so for you both, I guess, when you hear the word community, what comes up for you personally?
So for me, I'd say when I hear the word community, it's I think of an extended family. I think of someone that I can go to that sort of gets me, and someone that I can lean on, and that could also have them lean on me, when needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a great question. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear the word community is safety, kind of like a sounding board. And like Marian just said, like extended family, people that you can count on, and who have your best interest at heart.
Yes, for sure. So I see a lot of people in the chat also saying family, togetherness, support, and love. So a lot of that ties together in that space. And so for Marian, how has race and culture shaped your journey with NMOSD?
How has race and culture shaped my journey? So it's interesting because being diagnosed with NMOSD, first, I just have to kind of preface that by saying I had never heard of this, prior to being diagnosed. And I had had very little conversations, very few conversations, I should say, with people in my family about anything autoimmune related. And so now on the other side of a diagnosis, I think it's important for me to, educate my community, and sort of educate people who look like me about NMOSD, and about autoimmune diseases and rare diseases, and also encourage them to make sure that they are listening to their body. And when they're going in to have conversations with maybe healthcare providers that don't look like them, making sure that they are empowered prior to walking into that office, because they have had conversations with people who could help them prepare for those conversations, or help them think through questions to ask. So I think as far as just race and culture, I know that we are a very resilient people. And so even when we are faced with, something that completely catches us off guard in the way that
Right.
NMOSD caught me off guard, we
Mhm.
know how to, lean into, our community. We know how to lean into the support that we get from each other, um, the familiar feeling that we get when we see someone that looks like us. And so that has been, for me, that's been, just something that has been truly a tremendous resource for helping me, just with coping, and again, and just, having a support system.
Yes, and you're definitely going to hear that a lot tonight about leaning into your community. And I hope that some pieces of this conversation will help get you to that community and where you can go for that. But that's so true. We really do need that village and that community to help us get through certain things. It's not always a one person show, no matter how strong you are.
Yeah.
Nwandi, did you feel like similar story to that when thinking about your MS experience and your journey?
Yes, yes. Absolutely. When I was listening to Marion speak, I was just like, Black women are really just like, we are it. Like we have this unspoken kind of concept of just like community. We know how to support each other. It's just in us. I think one thing that I wanted to add to that is like being diagnosed with MS as a Black woman really highlighted the importance of advocacy, especially in like the medical industry, you know, because there's like this strong Black woman complex, right? And we're just we're the strong ones. We're okay. Like they don't, you know, they don't need any support. They got this. And I'm like, actually, I don't got this. I need help. So it taught me how to, and it's still teaching me how to advocate for myself and my needs, and also advocate for my fellow chronic illness warriors. So definitely highlighting self-advocacy for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Speaking up and
Mhm.
making sure that not just for yourself, but somebody around you who may not have found their voice yet. So that's a great point to make there. And Marion, what emotional or mental hurdles do you feel like you've had to kind of face and get over, and how did you work yourself through that?
So emotional and mental hurdles. Wow. There have been a few. So I think I would first have to say, so I was diagnosed with NMO in November 2020, which was height of the pandemic. And even when the day or two, my first, I think maybe my second return to the ICU after being diagnosed, the hospital started to really go into lockdown. And so I wasn't, I was living in Boston at the time. I am not from Boston, so I had no family there. So I received the diagnosis just without any family there, and had to really process it because, most of my family is in the South. Lots of my family they're in Mississippi, and at the time, Mississippi, their numbers were out of control. I don't think, the state of Massachusetts would have allowed many people from Mississippi to fly in during that time because of restrictions. And so for me, I really had to just lean into my faith. So emotionally, um, I'm glad that I grew up, with just a faith-based foundation because I needed that during that time of my life. And so, just the emotional hurdle was really, knowing that you can get through this.
Mhm.
This is very different than anything else that has come your what has, that you've had to experience. Um, but it's not unfamiliar in a sense that, you've had some things that you've had to face in your life that you've had to also overcome. And so really just like tapping into that part of myself.
Right.
Um, and then as far as the mental hurdles, I would say I was terrified when I got diagnosed. So much so that I didn't talk about my diagnosis for a long time to people outside of the one friend that was there with me when I got diagnosed. I was very, private about it. And I'm talking about didn't have conversations with my best friend, two
Yeah.
best friends, did not talk to them about the specifics for a long time. I was sort of embarrassed that I had, been diagnosed with this disease. And, the mental hurdle was, sort of just getting to a place of acceptance
Yeah.
and also getting to a place of acceptance, but being able to say what my life looks like going forward is still going to be on my own terms.
Right.
No, I think one of the things that I often heard people talk about when I got diagnosed, and this is no offense to anyone who, this is their belief system or the life philosophy that they live by, is that I had to sort of grieve the life that I had before. And there was something that was sort of, I wasn't completely bought into that because I know that there's some aspects and elements of having to grieve,
Mhm.
some parts of it I knew things were going to look different going forward, but I wanted to also challenge myself in a way to say, how can I get back to some of those parts of myself before diagnosis that I want to move forward with. And
Okay.
so just, mentally, it was just about just that positive reinforcement for myself. Running was one of those things that I was doing before I got diagnosed. So I had to just encourage myself, to keep that positive mindset.
Right, right. And in kind of response or to that, or just some additional resources, Nawandi, or tools that NMOSD patients can turn to support their mental health.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Of course, the first resource I'm always going to plug in is like, if you feel the need, finding a good therapist, or mental health professional. You can look for therapists who, work or specialize in grief. Marion was just talking about how there is an element of grief being diagnosed and living with a chronic health condition. You can go to Psychology Today. My personal favorite is Therapy for Black Girls. You can do inclusive therapist. Also, if you need psychiatrists, there's no shame in, needing to take any kind of psychotropic medications to address the depression and or anxiety that can also be associated with being diagnosed and living with a chronic health condition. Peer support, right? Things like events and campaigns like this one that we are all on right now. We Are Ill, right? Like, We Are Ill. The Samara Foundation, which I'm over here like researching because now I'm getting hip to it. So it's like there's so many different resources that we have at our fingertips. And the thing about peer support is you're typically surrounded by people who have very similar experiences, and there's power in that, and kind of can create an enhanced sense of belonging. Last thing I want us to mention is just like mind body tools, right? I don't know who all here has heard of the term mindfulness, right? Getting that body moving to the best of your ability, any kind of expressive writing or journaling, anything that can help you kind of process through those experiences. Sometimes we're living in here, and that can get very draining and overwhelming. And so we sometimes need to kind of just release and move some of that energy through our bodies. And so, yeah, I think mental health professionals, peer support, and just really identifying and using like those mind-body connection tools are wonderful resources. And I'll also put those directories I mentioned in the chat, just in case anybody is looking for a mental health professional.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And speaking of the chat, I want to go ahead and have another little sound off in here. Have you found it easier or harder to talk about NMOSD with family and friends? Why or why not? Feel free to drop your answers in the chat. And I know this one's a little bit longer to answer, so we'll give it a little second. Okay, so I see someone said it's been a bit harder to talk about it. Yes, invisible symptoms are a real thing. So a lot of the times you'll hear, well, you look fine, or I'm not really seeing what it is, but it's hard to talk about those invisible symptoms, especially the fatigue. Yes. So thank you for that. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that programs like this are so important because it's not just for patients, it's for providers, it's for families, it's for everybody that's involved and part of your team. So definitely want to be able to actually share and understand, have some understanding of what the disease is and what that background is. And that really leads us kind of into our next session. So we can go ahead and make sure that we're also equipped with the right information too. So I'm going to kind of try to keep it brief and concise, but I really just want to highlight some information that every NMOSD patient should know, certainly every Black NMOSD patient should know. And knowledge is one of the ways that we protect ourselves. And so because the better we understand what we're facing, the more empowered we are to be able to take some action. All right, so let's get into it. And so Devick's disease was recognized in the literature all the way back in 1894, but a true pivotal moment is when the discovery of the aquaporin 4 antibody happened in 2004, and then it was actually added to the diagnostic criteria in 2006. So the term NMO spectrum disorder became more widely used in 2007. And then in 2019, we had our first FDA-approved treatment for NMOSD, which is always an amazing, groundbreaking event to happen because, that just leads to even more discovery and more ways to have better treatment and better quality of life for our patients. And so neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder, or NMOSD, is a distinct condition. So this is not a version of MS. This is its own pathology, even though they may look similar at first. NMOSD primarily targets astrocytes and not the actual myelin-producing cells that you can see affected in MS patients. And the immune system mistakenly attacks these aquaporin 4 or water channel proteins. And this is mostly found a lot in the optic nerves or the spinal cord or areas of the brainstem. And so you'll see a flow chart of this in the next slide as well. But this explains why some of the symptoms like vision loss or nausea from the area of postrema syndrome and those types of attacks are so specific and can be so severe sometimes. So it's important that we recognize it more as a clinical syndrome. So we're not just looking for one event, but we're looking for kind of a group of symptoms that often occur together. It's not a uniform disease. There's a lot of variability that happens. And so there's sometimes a co-occurrence of optic neuritis, that painful eye movement of the eye, the vision loss, the color changes that might be experienced with that. And then transverse myelitis, and some of the symptoms with that can be, sensation changes below the level of where we actually see the lesion in the spinal cord. And we have some slides with that a little bit later on too. But understanding that there's variability in these symptoms is going to be really important, and knowing that just because you don't have what the next person has doesn't mean that you don't have the diagnosis, right? So you have to share your story and be able to tell your own symptoms, and then let your provider be able to put that picture together for you, right? And next slide. Okay, so NMOSD has a strong female predominance. It's about 70 to 90% of people that are diagnosed are women. The typical age of onset is between 35 and 45, but it can affect children and elderly people as well. And while it's mostly a sporadic disease, there is a small genetic component that we're still learning about. I think we're learning a lot about this disease every single day. So what we know is that NMOSD tends to hit hardest in populations that are already facing barriers in the healthcare system. So these include Black, Afro-Caribbean, Asian, and indigenous communities. Next slide. And now here's another critical part: is not only is NMOSD more common in people who are not Caucasian, but it also tends to present earlier and more severely in these same populations. So when we're talking about Black patients, for example, they're more likely to experience these aggressive attacks, particularly in their brain and spinal cord. And yet outcomes are not necessarily worse because of the biology, right? I think we've seen that kind of discussed throughout time. But there are other factors that can make those outcomes worse, and that's being misdiagnosed, that's having limited access to the right treatments, and mislabeling of this disease as multiple sclerosis. So that's why this education is so important, and that's why what we're doing today is so essential. Next slide. And so here are some clinical presentations that you can see with NMO. So you can have muscle spasms, we can have limb weakness, sensation loss, paralysis of certain limbs, and loss of bowel and bladder functions. And the picture that you see on the right is an image of the cervical spine. And you can see kind of in that spinal cord, there's what they call an LETM, or a longitudinally extensive lesion that's going across more than 3 vertebrae. So this is something that we can see on MRI and imaging. And we can talk a little bit more about some more clinical presentations. So we have vision loss that can be seen in both NMO and MS. But the vision loss tends to be more severe in NMOSD patients. And usually, even though optic neuritis can be seen in multiple sclerosis, optic neuritis, when it comes to NMOSD, can be unilateral or bilateral. So it can affect both eyes in NMOSD far more frequently than we would see that in an MS patient. So that's something to pay attention to if you're experiencing that, to make sure you let your healthcare provider know that as well. Go ahead. And another kind of weird symptom that I ask about and people kind of get shocked that I ask about is hiccups and nausea and vomiting. And so those are all things that we can see, especially with area postureness syndrome, where the brainstem is affected. And, you know, we want to make sure that that is something that you actually let your provider know. If you're experiencing these symptoms more frequently, there are ways of finding different treatments for these symptoms. So that's another thing to kind of be on the lookout for. These symptoms are not as typical in an MS patient. So that's another thing to kind of make note of. Okay. And when it comes to NMOSD, I think when it comes to any autoimmune condition or really any medical condition, you want to have a comprehensive care team. For NMOSD patients, this is going to be crucial in enhancing your quality of life, optimizing your care, and also promoting the communication that you have. So it takes the burden off of you to be able to have your care team be actually talking to each other. I love when I get messages from my mental health professionals, my rehab professionals, because that means that you know, all of these things are going to make the quality of life for my patient better. When we're all talking together, it helps you not have to relay that message to every single person that you're seeing. We know that that can be mentally taxing as well. Next slide. So now we're going to quickly talk treatment. So when it comes to someone in the acute phase or somebody that's experiencing a relapse, we typically start with high dose IV steroids, but they don't always work on their own. And that's when people require plasma exchange or PLEX. And this helps to kind of remove those harmful antibodies from the bloodstream. And the key is really early and aggressive treatment to make sure that we can prevent as much permanent damage as possible. And sometimes treatments for MS have actually been documented to exacerbate some NMOSD activity. So we just want to be mindful, again, of making the right diagnosis by what we're hearing, what we're seeing. So it's important for providers as well to be aware of this. So on this slide, I'm not going to read this out to you, but these are some of the options that we have now for long-term treatment. And so all of these are designed to reduce relapses and prevent permanent disability. And I think one thing to be mindful of is that we see some really good percentages of reduction of relapses in all of these medications. And I think it's great that we have options that, you know, we can use for the long-term treatment of NMOSD. One thing to think about when having the conversation with your doctors is also the uh, duration at which the frequency, sorry, at which you're going to be getting these infusions. Some of them are every 4 weeks, some are every 6 months, some are every 2 weeks. So you want to be mindful of what you're signing up for and how that's going to impact your life. And so what now, right? Even with all this progress, we still have a problem in our communities. We still know that we have this huge recognized burden of NMOSD in Black communities, but we're seeing that underdiagnosis, even with this burden being recognized in our community. And too many patients hear something like what people mentioned in the chat before, that you look fine, or maybe it's just stress. So we need our providers to listen to our patients more carefully. And I want to encourage you guys, if you're not feeling like you're being heard, to find a place that you feel like you're being heard. Just because you go to one person doesn't mean that you have to stay there if you don't feel like you're getting the care and the support and the love that you deserve when you are sharing such vulnerable information. Okay. And so we definitely need more peer-to-peer support. We need the mental health services, the community-based resources, and I'm so excited to see what resources Nwandi has for us as well. But using these platforms like We Are Ill is going to be great for us to keep this community going. This is just the first of 4 sessions, so I'm super excited to continue the conversation. And representation always matters. And I think this is a huge thing that people are working on, that my colleagues are working on, and myself, is that we need that increase in diversity in clinical trials. Clinical trial enrollment, the content creation, the media representation of what the people look like that are in these clinical trials as well. So too often our stories are left out. And I think that they most of the time will hold the key to understanding how certain things are affecting our communities. And so if you're interested in clinical research and you have more questions on that, definitely reach out to your care team and ask them to get informed about what research opportunities are actually available for me. Because I think too often in the clinical setting, Black and Brown patients are not being asked or recruited enough to participate, even if they do meet the criteria for certain clinical trials. All right, so we have another chat moment. So what is one thing that you wish your healthcare provider explained better to you about NMOSD? And Marion, as we wait for this chat, maybe this is something you can chime in on as well when you were first diagnosed.
I think maybe something that I wish my healthcare provider explained better in the beginning was just more details around my treatment options. Um, and I wish at the time I had some information that compared each treatment option so that I could see kind of a side-by-side comparison of the drug, it's, some information about the drug, and then also the efficacy rate. Because what ended up happening to me is the first treatment drug that I was on, I relapsed. And that relapse, when you relapse as an NMOSD patient, it can be, just devastating. And so for me, the paralysis, being partially paralyzed and having to walk again, that might not have been a part of my story had I consider other treatment options and just knew a little bit more detail about what those options were in the beginning. So I think that's definitely, if I could turn back the hands of time, I would have just said, let's not, talk about just the one recommendation of a drug. Let me see what all the options are, and let me just weigh in on that, and consult with a couple of people, and then make a decision, make a better informed decision.
And I see that kind of reflected in some of the chat answers as well. So testing and treatment options, what your future looks like after the diagnosis, right? Not just even the right now. And I see another question here that says, does this have the same ending as MS? And we can talk a little bit more in the Q&A regarding those questions. But yeah, just what does it mean to have a chronic illness, right? It's definitely a life-changing conversation to have at that moment. And, Marion, you shared how you even received that information initially. So I can't even imagine having to work through the options of treatment, in that same situation. So we're gonna go on to our next section here as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more on how we really build together, right? So this next part is kind of more of uplifting our own voices and learning from one another and sharing really what has carried us. So feel free to drop your thoughts and your questions in the chat. And this conversation is definitely not a lecture. So again, we want to just keep it light and be able to talk freely. So starting off, we can start with you, Marion, again, about just what does self-advocacy look like for you when you're navigating your appointments and your treatment decision?
Yeah, so I would have to say that my self advocacy journey has been just that, a journey. Obviously, being diagnosed in the beginning and not knowing anything about NMOSD, my conversations with my healthcare team in the beginning, it was very one-sided. It was a lot of just me listening and, sort of more so on like the reactive side of things. But as I continue to learn, and learning through connecting with the community, the Samira Foundation was a huge resource because that's where I found my NMOSD people. And so there were people who had been on this NMOSD journey for over a decade. And so just asking those questions and talking to them, and, it's like we spoke the same foreign language. And so going into my meetings, then it became okay, I have these questions for my doctor, and here's a list of things that I want to ask my neurologist. And I would have my cell phone with me, and I had notes in the notes section of my phone. And
Yeah.
my neurologist got to the point where they knew when I showed up, it was just they were waiting for me to pull my phone out. Like, okay, like what are the questions for today? But also, I would pull my phone out when I didn't understand what they were telling me, so that then I could take that back and sit with it and read and ask people about it in the community. And so I just became, it was just that education and that awareness piece for myself it began to improve. And the more I would learn, the more I would try and share with other people in the community. And I would encourage them to do the same. And then I started to sit on these panels and different things like that. And so again, in the beginning, like I said, you don't know what you don't know, but the important thing to remember, especially for those who are newly diagnosed with any rare disease, is there's likely a community of people out there who have already been diagnosed, who've already jumped some of those hurdles, and they can be a tremendous resource for someone else. And so for me, it's about now it's basically a shared decision making is the approach that I have now. So my
Yeah.
doctor knows that. Even I remember when we were having a discussion about my most recent treatment change, I they shared and said, "Hey, I think this will be a great option because I know you love to travel and this would help with work-life balance and different things." And I said, "Okay." And I sat with that for a long time because I started a new job. So I didn't want to make any drastic life changes until I'd been at been with my company for a year, in the event that I needed to take short or long-term disability. Like these were things that now I know because I knew that when I relapsed, I was out for a whole year, just from
Right.
paralysis to learning to walk again. So the more you know, the more you are able to then help better navigate, those conversations with healthcare providers. And so that's been patient advocacy is so important. It's so important to read, to stay informed, and to connect with others in the community who can help you learn more about your disease.
Yes. And I see in the chat that Amber mentioned that, they often feel intimidated at their doctor's appointments, even after all of these years. So, Nawandi, how do you recommend that NMOSD patients or patients in general prepare for meetings with neurologists or specialists so that their voice is actually heard, especially when they're feeling intimidated or anxious? Oh, I think you're on mute, Nawandi.
I just dove right on in because I'm like, this is okay. But I think first, you know, recognizing that being anxious and feeling uncomfortable is okay, number one. That doesn't make you, wrong or weak. It's just this is difficult stuff to navigate. So like Marion was saying, write down your questions and concerns ahead of time. Even if you have to do it like with a friend, sometimes, or a friend or a family member or someone in your support system, as kind of like a second eye or ear, they might be able to think of questions that maybe you're a little bit too anxious to even wrap your mind around. So yeah, writing down questions, bringing a support person with you to your appointments if you're able to, or if it's allowed. Again, having that second ear and eye, I think can really be a really powerful tool for comprehension. Um, with that also being said, something I recently started doing is tracking my symptoms. Like, so you can go in and you're not like trying to remember, like, when was my last flare up or when was my last hand tremor? Or I know it. I have my journal. I can tell you this is when it happened. This is what time, 8 p.m. on 6/27. This is what happened. So it kind of just helps you, it helps eliminate the guesswork during your appointments. Um, so yeah, I think, yeah, prepping your questions and concerns, bringing a support system, and if you can't have not started yet, use a tracker for your symptoms so that you can go in more prepped. And I think when we can go in a little more prepped, it alleviates that sense of anxiety we have going into these appointments.
Absolutely. And so in moments where we feel like the medical system can't relate to our experience, how do you reclaim your power?
Whew. So when we talk about like, I think just going back to that self-advocacy piece, we as Black women have to speak up for ourselves in the medical field. We just absolutely have to. And so again, reclaiming that, when I think about reclaiming our power as patients, I think about education, making sure that we are absolutely learning what we can about not only our condition, but how it affects us. We have to know how it is impacting our mind, body, and spirit so that we are able to convey that clearly and confidently in these spaces. Another thing that I want to point in is like, make sure that you are documenting everything and asking your doctor to document everything. Everything we need, everything we spoke about needs to be in that aftercare summary that you send in my chart. Everything. And if it's not, I'm sending you that message saying, hey, remember we spoke about this. Especially when it's no secret, that as Black women, there's a higher rate of dismissal, ignoring, brushing off. And so I need to know that you heard me and that it's documented. This is the issue I brought up, and this was your response. It can seem a little, it's a lot, but it's so needed. And so that's what I think about when I think about reclaiming our power, understanding how our condition impacts us so that we can clearly make sound decisions when we are in those rooms with our doctors.
And if I may, I just want to add one thing to what Nwandi just said about my chart. My chart is a great resource for you, especially newly diagnosed, but for anyone, because you can go back and read those notes and you can see what was written. And even if you don't understand it, you use it like a course. Like, hey, if you're in a college course and you see the notes and you don't understand it, you're going to kind of research like, okay, what does this mean? And there may be some things that you have questions about from those My Chart notes that you then take to your doctor and say, I was looking through my notes and I noticed that this language was used. Can you break that down for me? Or can you kind of walk me through that or tell me more information about that? So those notes that are in your My Chart, in your My Chart notes are extremely resourceful as well.
Absolutely. And just to
Yeah.
comment kind of from on the other side of it, it's don't ever think that you're bothering your healthcare provider or you're becoming a nuisance or a nag. You will not believe the amount of communication that I see from other demographics, right? So I yearn for that to be something that I see in Black women is holding that space, taking up that space and asking those questions that, if I write something in my note and you don't know what it means, I want you to ask me because I want to make sure that we're clear in our communication. So please definitely ask those questions. Other people are asking those questions maybe 1, 2, 3 times a day. So don't feel like you guys are, inundating your healthcare provider. We are your resource. I don't want you to have to, yes, you're going to look up some things on your own, but I want to make sure I'm giving you credible resources. I'm giving you good information so that you don't read something that causes anxiety or, that causes you to go on a wrong direction. So we want to make sure that we talk and we communicate effectively. So yes, please use the My Chart. Please use the questions, print it out, do what you need to do, and reach out to your care team. And so we'll kind of dive in a little bit too about what kind of barriers and cultural, financial, systemic that you all have faced as Black women with chronic illnesses and how you kind of overcome some of those obstacles, whether that be insurance or transportation or biases that you experience in the healthcare system. And feel free to break it down however you'd like. But how do you overcome some of those systemic challenges that we often see being faced?
Are you wanting us to chime in on that?
Yeah.
So, okay, I have a couple of different things. So, one thing you talked about the transportation piece. Another reason why it's important to kind of just be connected to just various communities, whether it's the rare disease community or autoimmune community, is because there are some resources that you will just not find out about unless you're connected to these communities. An example for me was when I was in Boston, I was commuting, driving about 30 minutes one way to my infusion appointments. And, I had just not thought anything like there was another option. And I just remember connecting with this patient support group for people living with rare diseases. And the guy, this guy, we were having a conversation via Instagram, and he said, we offer sort of like, funding to, we transportation funding or, reimbursements on, any sort of, out-of-pocket finances for getting you to your infusion appointment. He said, or we can actually schedule transportation to pick you up. And I was thinking, what? I've been driving for 3 years. I think it was close to 3 years at the time. But again, that was just something that infusion day is just draining enough, and I was working full time, so I was working full time, driving to my infusion appointments, getting back, and the whole nine. And so again, that's just, tapping into, those types of resources is, extremely important. I wanted to, kind of just add that because I know you said what are some of the financial hurdles that we're dealing with. Again, there are some drug providers or drug makers, I should say, that will reimburse you on the copay for your infusion copay. My infusion provider currently reimburses on that copay that's needed, that out of pocket expense, et cetera. And so I didn't know about that until someone else who was in the NMO community said, "Hey, I don't pay for this, they cover they have this copay reimbursement program. Are you enrolled in that?" And I was like, I didn't even know I could be enrolled. So that's just one of the things, because financially this weighs on us, financially, just living with a rare disease. And so that's why, again, it's so important to be a part of a community, because these things are important for us to know. And then I think this can kind of lead to, like, on the mental health side, if you are burdened by a lot of things financially, then you're tired driving to your infusion appointments, that can kind of weigh in on you mentally, to where you do find yourself like going through depression and things of that nature. And so all of those things, I think, sort of are like interconnected.
And Mary, you brought up a great point of just finding that community that can give you that little resource that could be life-changing for you. Nwandi, do you have any other kind of comments on community and how we can rally to really address these barriers? Turn that sound on, girl.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I get excited and I just start running off at the mouth. Yeah, I mean, I guess from a mental health standpoint, again, just really rallying together looks like finding ourselves in spaces like this so that we can surround ourselves with people who experience the same unique challenges. Um, something
Nwandi, I think it's breaking up just a little
that I
bit.
really just wanted to piggyback. Utilize your.
Okay, we're back. Yep,
What about now?
you're good.
Okay, all right, internet, don't start. Okay. Something I really wanted to piggyback off Marion was utilizing your social work, the case managers, I'm sorry, at your hospital. And using them as a resource to help you find other resources. Financial stress can really increase, like Marion said, when we're dealing with living with a chronic health condition. And we can talk about, the grief and the loss, but also talking about how financial stress is directly tied to mental health. If I don't have my basic needs met, all the other stuff doesn't even, I mean, we can't even start to think about the other stuff until we know that our medicine is paid for, we have food on the table, we have transportation to get to our appointments. And so again, as a community, I think, that peer education and support. So again, finding ourselves in communities like this, buddy systems for our appointments, take somebody with you. Take somebody with you. And so that by them being there, they're not only able to be a support for you, but now they're increasing their knowledge and their awareness of our health conditions so that they can go and help us spread awareness. And yeah, just and cultural representation, like I know we've been talking about, making sure that we are showing up in spaces that we may not find ourselves in so that they can know what our unique challenges are. Yeah, I think, yeah, I can go on and on, but I'll stop there.
And thank you so much for that. And speaking about that support group and that support system that we bring along with this, how do you all set boundaries around the actual help that you get from your support system, especially when loved ones want to protect you, but you want to still have your independence to do things. You know, sometimes the protection can feel a little bit overwhelming when you feel like you're kind of living in a bubble, because they're scared for you and they're concerned for you about what's going on with you. And so how do you help set those boundaries for yourself in your support system?
Yeah. I think first, making sure that we first defining what a boundary is. The way I like to even explain it is boundaries aren't to keep people out, it's to keep peace in. And so there are these limits that we set for ourselves, whether it's emotional, physical, or mental, to protect our energy and our time and our peace. And so first, I think in order to be able first, setting boundaries isn't always comfortable. Let's start there. And so we can't acknowledge that the same things that we are setting in place to protect ourselves can also feel a little icky, and that's okay. But we are making sure that we, in the long run, protect our time and our energy and space. And so being able to say no to things that drain you, asking loved ones not to bring up certain topics if you don't want to, that can be an example of a boundary. Paying attention to your own capacity. So being able to say, this is what I can handle and this is what I can't, and showing yourselves grace and making those decisions. So I
Yeah,
think that's kind of like, in short, how we
yeah,
can set those
absolutely.
boundaries because they're important. They're so important.
They definitely are. And so Marion, can you give kind of example of a loving boundary that you had to enforce around yourself?
I thought I had set boundaries until a week ago. Four of my nieces got shipped out for the summer, ages 13, 14, and two 4-year-olds. So I think I need to reimagine. No, I'm kidding. So my family, I think for me, it hasn't been because I don't live in the same state with my
Right.
family, so that's been helpful. Nobody's just kind of like popping up and or anything like that. I think what for me is I have to set boundaries sometimes if I'm on a call and I'm talking to a family member about something, and I know that it is starting to again take the conversations kind of leaning from like peaceful to sort of painful, then I have to just hit the pause. And so
Mm,
I've had to, I'm aware of that, when, hey, this conversation is not healthy for me,
right.
literally, figuratively. And I know, when I was in the rehabilitation facility, learning how to walk again, and I was getting ready to be released, one of the neurologists said to me, there are a couple of things you're going to have to focus on to prevent a relapse. You're going to have to focus on, hydration, nutrition, um, getting sleep, the proper amount of rest, and you're going to have to focus on like stress management and like, that mental health piece. And so anytime anything, pops up that falls into one of those categories, those are high priority categories for me. And whatever I need to do to get those things back aligned, that's what I'm focused on because I know what a relapse looks like, and I know that I don't want to put myself on that path again. So yeah,
Yeah.
so again, it's just knowing, and sometimes it's not taking a call. It may just be as simple as that. Letting a call go to voicemail has it's not the end of the world. And yeah, especially if it's keeping you healthy.
And that kind of leads a little bit to the next question that I wanted to ask about, when advocating for yourself and doing all of these things feels a bit exhausting. What are some of those self-care practices that help you recharge, whether it's, a little ritual or, you talked about your faith earlier. What are some of those things that recharge you to get you going?
Yeah, so definitely my faith, high priority. I have a prayer group that I meet with every Friday. So we check in with each other. We make sure, we talk about the highs and lows of our week. We help support each other. So that's definitely a huge go-to for me. I am a huge advocate of a good spa day. I love a good massage. So to be able to just go and just like relax, spa day massage, that is dreamy for me. I enjoy traveling, I enjoy traveling the world. I take solo trips by myself all the time. And, it's interesting because before I was diagnosed, I was taking solo trips by myself just because, I was like, okay, I need some me time and it's great. And because, you can just move on your own schedule and yeah, at your own pace. After getting diagnosed, I realized how really like how important that is because now when I travel, I could, the first couple of days there, I could like sleep in and just rest because my body, the fatigue and the tired, that comes with an autoimmune condition. So yeah, so it's just, those things, being able to tap into what makes you feel good and doing as much of that as often as you possibly can.
And Nawandi, from a mental health perspective, how do we encourage other to prioritize emotional rest?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is like, as a community, we have to normalize like slowing down. And just recognizing that rest is critical for a lot of us, right? We mentioned fatigue and we don't want to stress our bodies, so we have to rest. And in order to be able to rest, we have to normalize being able to take steps back and take ourselves off of autopilot. We have to learn how to do that. Working with your mental health professional, working through what that looks like for you, because it will look different. You ask 10 different people slowing down, what slowing down looks like, you'll get 10 different answers. And so I'm working on incorporating, I guess, that into a prepared wellness plan on that centers rest, scheduling days off, using that PTO if you have it, using those listen,
But
okay, when
yeah.
I'm self-employed now, but when I had a 9 to 5, the way my people were looking at me like I was like, I don't care, I'm using those sick days and I'm going to go home and take a nap. That's just what I'm going to do. So scheduling those mental days. I have a friend group and we take mental days together. So we just gather a group. There's a group of us and we say, hey, we're just gonna eat pizza, binge watch trash TV, and just chill for the day. Um, so you can make it restful and fun at the same time. And just making sure that we're checking in with one another. Hey, Marion, when the last time you took a day off this month? Yeah. No? Okay, so when are we gonna do that, sis? I mean, because we just have to, okay? And so, yes, normalize slowing down, holding each other accountable to rest and scheduling that time off. I love how Marion said traveling, like find things that you enjoy doing so that we're not just experiencing. We know what the stress feels like. We know what the overwhelm feels like. We know what the back and forth to the medical appointments feels like. We know all that. Where's the joy? Okay, spa days. Okay, hopping on a plane. Okay, going to the family reunion.
Mhm.
Right? So that's my take on rest and joy. Got to incorporate the joy in there.
Absolutely. I love that word. I love the joy. And so looking ahead, I'll start with you, Marion, on this one. What's a concrete step that some of our attendees tonight can take this week to strengthen their community? Do you have any specific actions that they can engage in to strengthen their community this week?
Yeah, so first I would say if you have not found a community in an organization, seek out seek out an organization. And that could just be any organization that is linked to, your autoimmune condition or, the rare disease community, just for knowledge sake, if nothing else, just so you're learning and you're finding out about other resources that could be made available to you. And then the other thing I would say that's an easy next step is just start, writing down a list of things that bring you joy. And so when you're looking for a way to recharge, to press reset, you can look at that list and say, okay, I'm going to do this thing because I know that's something that's going to bring me joy. And for those of you that are not feeling as empowered as you could be yet for, during those appointments with your healthcare provider, make sure you are using that note section of your phone to write down some questions. So just have a couple of questions that you take with you into your next appointment with your health care provider, and just ask a couple of those questions and then see how that conversation goes.
I just want to shout out Tanya because that is hilarious. She said spa, nails, hair, shopping, but then I return the items and then bubble bath and all of that. No, keep the items, Tanya. And Nawandi, just kind of a brief mindset shift. How do we go from feeling isolated to feeling like we can co-create a network that's holding us up?
Yes, I really, really love this question. Find a person to share your lived experience with, even if it's one person. A lot of times, isolation kind of reinforces this shame that, or this idea that we have something to be ashamed of because we live with a chronic health condition. So, if you can gather enough courage to just share with one person, and then I think that opens the door to be more vulnerable in the spaces you find yourself in. Um, Something that I remind myself of is I don't have to be fine in order to be loved and to be loved well. And because I reminding myself of this, helps me to kind of come out of that shell. Because we retreat, we shrink back, we're like, oh, this is too much. If this is too much for me, what are other people going to think? They're going to think I'm too much too. But give yourself permission to allow the people in your life to support you and to support you in the ways that you need. You are not too much. You are not too damaged. You are not too broken. You are a person living this experience, and there are people out there who want to help, who want to support. You're looking at a few of them right here, right? So, yeah. And I think the last thing is, if you don't see the spaces that you need, get with a friend and create them. That's how we are real started. Victoria was like, I don't see myself in none of these spaces, so I'm gonna create it, right?
Mhm.
So don't be afraid to go out there and create spaces and invite other people in. And it doesn't always just have to be people who live with this chronic health conditions. Invite your support system in so that they can learn as well. We have to teach people how to support us. And in order to do that, we have to know what we need.
Yeah. Thank you, Nawandi. Thank you for that. And so up next, we have some key takeaways that I just want to make sure we highlight after that beautiful conversation and before we close. So there are some just practical things that you can carry with you after you leave here tonight. And one of them is building and leaning into your community, opening up those conversations with your peers, with your family, and getting that support system around you. Next, we want to make sure that you can advocate for yourself and advocate for your care, like your life depended on it, because it does. And I want you guys to feel that, empowerment that you have to actually speak up and hold space in those rooms where you are the person that is the most important one in the room. We want to make sure that your quality of care is where it needs to be. And invest in your total wellness. As you can see, Marian and Nawandi have mentioned multiple times just the different ways that they recharge, the importance of mental health and all of that stuff. So we want to make sure your mind, body, and spirit is taken care of. And just a quick reminder that there will be the branded resource boxes that are going to go out to the first 50 attendees after completing the post survey. So make sure you complete that post-event survey, and we're going to take some questions here in a moment from the Q&A. But first, I wanted to kind of get another little drop in the chat one more time as well of one action that you plan to take after this webinar. So we'll go ahead and give you just a chance to drop that in the chat, and I'll even open that to Marian and Nawandi too as people are replying. What is something that you're going to do after this webinar, or an action that you're going to take?
I'm definitely gonna schedule me a massage appointment because I was thinking it's been a little while. So spa day, massage appointment. Yes, I'm with you, Daisy.
Yes.
Definitely gonna get a spa day on the books ASAP.
Absolutely.
I'm,
Self.
I'm with y'all on the spa. I've never been like had a real spa day, and so now I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a try. Yeah.
Absolutely. The spa is a popular moment. Hopefully, maybe the box will have a spa day in it. I don't know, but maybe that's something we can do later.
There's a candle in there, so it'll be it's nice for when you come back from your spa day. You can just light that candle that's in that We Are EL box, and it's very nice and relaxing.
That's awesome. Making sure to take a support person with me to my appointments. That's huge. Yes.
Yes.
Anything you can do to take that burden off of you of remembering everything. Ask for that after visit summary. Yes, as providers, we have busy days and things like that, but that summary is something that can help you guide you for those questions, and you should ask for it if that's something that's going to help you.
Mhm.
And learning how to relax more. Yes, I think everyone needs to do that. It's hard to just put yourself on pause, but it's so important.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Make dinner, but also help spread awareness. Yes, thank you so much. Please spread the word. Be there for a friend, or someone that is going through something. We always need that support. All right, and I see that we have a question in the Q&A, so I'm going to open that up real quick. And so Tanya, and I hope I'm saying that right, scalp issues, has anyone found a remedy? I think it's inflammation, and I don't know if it's from MS or taking Tysabri. Okay, so there's a couple things that could be going on with scalp, depending on how it feels, where it is, and all of that, the quality of what you're feeling. There's different things that can work for that. If it's more like pain coming from your neck, things like that, there's, cervical physical therapy that can be used. There's obviously injections and things with numbing medications that can help. But if it's more of a sensation, there's also similar medications that we would use like for neuropathy that can work sometimes for scalp pain or sensations there. Right. Any more questions for the Q&A?
Can I chime in on that really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's like I developed scalp psoriasis, I'm almost positive it started around the time I started taking Ocrevus for my MS. So maybe working with of course, bringing it up with your neurologist, but maybe looking into a dermatologist as well. They can do different testing and like biopsies to see if it is indeed psoriasis. I was prescribed a medication called Otezla, and it is another medication, but it works wonders. Just FYI.
And I see that she said yes. White patches after 2 to 3 days. Okay, great. Thank you, Nawandi. And then we have another question. Is IV therapy a viable option for inflammation and fatigue? So fatigue, I will say, is one of the hardest things to treat, and there's so many layers to that. So you really have to work with your doctor on, what are you feeling, and really go through that breakdown. Is there any mood that's affecting it? Is there any other outside environmental things that are affecting your fatigue? Are we taking proper rest throughout our day? Is there a mental component and a physical component? So there's a lot of questions that should be asked about your fatigue. Making sure that we're getting good rest at night, that we're having good activity during the day, and really good sleep hygiene. So definitely ask. There's not a magic bullet for fatigue. I wish I had one, but it's different for everybody. So talk with your provider about what type of fatigue you're experiencing, and then have them guide you a little bit more specifically on what can be done for exactly what you're going through. Okay. So, Kimberly, that's kind of a loaded question. But I will say that, the majority of the population is JCV virus positive. Just not everybody's going out there and checking if they have JCV, but I think that's kind of more so a question that you can have with your healthcare provider and see what you're on now, what you've been on, and then what options have higher. I'm assuming you're talking about risks of like PML and things like that. So talk with them about what you've been on before, what hasn't worked, and then take those next steps to see what's best for you in the future. All right, we have just a few minutes left. So maybe we can take one or two more questions before we close. Is there a specific diet I should follow for NMO? So I think with all chronic illnesses or autoimmune conditions, there's not one specific diet that I would recommend to you, but I think you have to know your body, what works for you and what doesn't. I would say stay away from things that are being pitched to you as these end all be all curative things. If you're paying $800 to thousands of dollars for these supplement packages every month, I've not seen any of that stuff be productive for people, but cause more financial burden. I would say things that improve your cardiovascular health, that improve just your overall well-being, those things with that align with a healthy lifestyle. The more fruits and veggies, and keep a lookout, because We Are Ill may have something down the line where it talks a little bit more about this. But really just looking at what is on my plate, and is this something that is a well-balanced meal? And Nawandi mentioned using the resources from that you already have that you're covered for. And so nutritionists are generally covered with your insurance. So making sure you have a nutritionist that understands you, understands where you're coming from, and helps you build that good, healthy diet for yourself. And so now to kind of bring us home, we have a few words of encouragement from our wonderful advocate, Marion. And this is just a reminder that no matter what you face, you are already a living testimony of resilience and strength. So Marion, go ahead and give us a word.
Yeah, so I just want to let you all know. I mean, I know we haven't been on this call all for an extended period of time beyond today. But even just thinking through my own journey of being diagnosed during the height of the pandemic, um, relapsing on a treatment within 60 days of being diagnosed, spending my first Christmas in the ICU, and then being partially paralyzed to having to go into a rehabilitation facility, and so many things that I just did not have on my radar. But looking on the other side of that, and how I am, a full-time employee working, but not even more so than that, advocating for individuals in this rare disease space and running marathons. It's a testament to human resilience. It's also a testament to something that my neurologist said, when he posted about me. And it was basically just a reminder that, the human, there is no limit with just human willpower. It's basically, we're gonna keep pushing, and we're gonna keep going, and we're going to do the things that are necessary to take care of ourselves, but also stay encouraged and know that, especially for those that are newly diagnosed and who are thinking, what's my life going to be like? Is there going to be a quality of life? Am I going to be able to lead a normal life? I mean, there are people who have started families after their diagnosis. There are people who have, had their first child after diagnosis. People who have, gotten promoted to vice presidents roles in their corporate positions. Hello, speaking about myself. And the list goes on. And so there are so many great things left for you to accomplish, and that, that are, even more amazing things that you're going to accomplish, with this, this new version of yourself. And so, stay encouraged, stay around people who continue to encourage you, continue to uplift you. If I can ever be a resource or be of support to you, please feel free to connect with me. I'm on Instagram, as I said earlier, _ the other MJ. I'm happy to have, any type of discussion that could be of support to anyone on this call, whether you're, from the NMOSD community or MS. And just know that, you know, it's not, it's not like we might not have any bad days, but that's the case for people who don't have rare diseases, right? But we're going to have not just some good days, we're going to have some extraordinary days, some great days, some life-changing days, some days that we never even imagined having prior to being diagnosed. And those are the days you're going to be able to share with other people and say, you know what was birthed on the other side of this rare disease? An even more resilient champion. So I hope that this, what we've shared has been helpful for you and insightful for you. And this isn't the end, in terms of our relationship in this rare community. This is only the beginning.
Thank you, Marian. Nawandi, will pass it to you.
Oh, so I'll make it quick because I know we gotta get on up out of here. But I just want to encourage you guys to be proud of yourselves for being on this webinar tonight. By being here, you are challenging a very deep-seated narrative that, that we are these, in super hyper independent and we don't need anybody and we're these strong women, in which we are. We are strong, we are resilient, but we also are very a Cornitas community. And so I just want you guys to know that I know I'm proud of you guys, but I want you guys to be proud of yourselves for giving yourself permission to put yourself in this space and receive the aid and the support that sometimes is difficult to ask for. So we're stripping down these narratives that reinforce shame or guilt and fear, and we are replacing them with those that are reflective of hope and community and love and abundance. And I'm just so happy to be here, and I really, really enjoyed this. And like Marian said, this is not the end. If you want to connect, I'll put my Instagram handle, and I'll also put my website and email. Use your resources, y'all. Like we said, we're resources. Use us, come to us. we understand the challenges that you guys are facing, but we also have been practicing, how to embody joy in the face of these challenges. So love y'all.
Thank you so much, Wandy. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. It was so good. Please reach out to any of us and stay tuned for much, much more from We Are Ill. So thank you guys. Have a good night.